But let's talk about Kawhi Leonard. Let's talk about the LA Clippers and whether or not they can be legitimate contenders and competitors in the Western Conference. Because I think a lot of people forget about this team. Because you look at the playoffs last year and you're like, okay, who are the repeat teams? Obviously, you have the Golden State Warriors who won the NBA Finals. You have the Memphis Grizzlies who are getting more experience, from John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., Dylan Brooks, and everybody else. Desmond Bane. You have teams like the Denver Nuggets who are going to be getting Jamal Murray. They've got Michael Porter Jr. and obviously the MVP in Nikola Jokic. I don't think he should have won MVP, but that's another topic, to talk about. You got all these teams. You got the Lakers. Oh, they're going to have a healthy LeBron. They have Westbrook. They have AD. If they're healthy, maybe we can see if they can do it this year because they, off and on injury for LeBron and AD all of last season. Westbrook played, I think, 79 games. So you look at those teams, you're like, all right, that's the West. That's the competition. You're forgetting about one team. The team that has been the most consistent contender over the last 3 years. The LA Clippers. They've been the team that has given so many of these teams a lot of trouble. Why? Because they've got two superstars. And I still believe Paul George is a superstar. They've got Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, both two-way phenomenal basketball players. Shout out to Gil. Yes, the Clippers, they are completely overlooked. And I feel like the last couple of seasons going into the year, everyone's like, oh my gosh, the Clippers, they're so good. And they're like, oh, they're a top 3 contender. I think the Clippers are a legitimate top 5 contender in the NBA. They signed John Wall, which, I'm not looking at this team like, oh, they added John Wall. Wow. Because it's not prime John Wall. John Wall is an asterisk. He's a question mark. We don't know exactly what he's going to be because he really hasn't had a chance to play competitive basketball since like 2017, maybe 2018 when he had that injury. We haven't gotten to see John Wall in a long time. He's probably going to be a little bit injured. He's going to, have to shake off the rust. But they're getting Kawhi Leonard and they have Paul George. Paul George wasn't on the Clippers for most of the year. He missed like the second half of the season. And the Clippers got to a point where they were in the play-in. And this was a team being led by Terrence Mann, Ivica Zubac, Nick Batum, Marcus Morris, and Robert Covington. They added Luke Kennard. They have Reggie Jackson. But this was a team where it was like, when you look at the rosters and you're like, oh, what team are they competing against? And it's like, oh, the Pelicans who have Brandon Ingram. They got CJ McCollum. They've got, obviously they have Zion, but he wasn't playing. Then you go, okay, what are the other teams? Oh, the Minnesota Timberwolves. Oh, well, they have Karl Anthony Towns and they have Anthony Edwards. And it was like, how are the Clippers here? They don't have Paul George. They don't have Kawhi. What are they doing? It doesn't make any sense. Well, now they have that back end of the roster. And I think this is a really well-balanced team. A really, really well-balanced team that is going to be frustrating to play. Because, oh yes, they also have, or had Norman Powell. They still have Norman Powell. But this is a team where they got shooters that are also defenders and they're athletic. Very rare breed of player, but they have a lot of them. They've got a, maybe a top 5, top 3 defender in the NBA in Kawhi Leonard. I think Paul George is a top 10 defender in the NBA, regardless of position. Then they have Robert Covington, who's maybe the best 3-and-D player in the NBA when it comes to versatility. Because he is a phenomenal shot blocker on the defensive end of the ball. I mean, he's big and he can shoot the ball like crazy. He finished the season shooting 50% from 3 over the last 10 games. Regular season last year, 38% from 3. And this is adding in the blocks, the steals, and the big-time plays that he's made. He played center in a lot of games for the Portland Trailblazers when he was there. He's played center for a lot of the teams that he's played because he can just do it all. He's one of those guys in the body and the athleticism and the skill set that can really guard any position, maybe outside of point guard. And he's coming off of your bench. Now, maybe you start him at the power forward spot instead of Nick Batum. You can kind of switch it out, but he's coming off your bench. So you've got one guy that, versatile, defender, scorer coming off the bench. It's always nice to have, but let's see, who else do they have coming off the bench? Well, they have Reggie Jackson. Reggie Jackson's been a starting point guard in the NBA for years. And is he the best player? No, but he's solid. He's going to go out there. He's going to manage the game. He's going to shoot well from the free throw line. He's going to pass the ball. He's going to be a solid NBA player. Right? Last year, he averaged 16.8 points per game. Shot just over 32% from three, just under 40% from the field. But, he was like arguably the number one option for half the season. You don't want him to be your number one option. But a backup point guard? Reggie Jackson is a great backup point guard to have. Then you add in Norman Powell, who can play really, really good defense. He can score the ball really well. He's going to be guarding your shooting. He's going to be playing the shooting guard spot. Fantastic, fantastic person to have, especially coming off the bench. Like, this is a guy that can start on a contending team, and you'd be like, that's a solid starter. Like, you would not look at it and be like, oh, wow, they got Norman Powell in the starting lineup. No. You're looking at that like, oh, man, and they have Norman Powell? Well, he's coming off the bench. With Reggie Jackson, who was a starter last year. So all of a sudden, you're like two guys that could be starters on contending teams. Then you look at it and you're like, okay, who's next? Oh, it's Marcus Morris. Marcus Morris is a good shooter. He's a good defender. He's a good facilitator. He's a well-balanced player. Again, another player that you could look at and say, hey, wow, he's starting on a championship team. You're not looking at that and being like, wow, this is bad. They're starting Marcus Morris and they're trying to win the finals. No. You're looking at that like, and they got Marcus Morris. A two-way facilitator, shooter, scorer, very good player. This team, the bench, is full of players that can be starters on contending rosters. And they're on the bench because the starters are guys like Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. And potentially John Wall. Reggie Jackson may end up starting for, a lot of the season. But if John Wall can come back and be, a decent vet, that's just adding to the fire. This is a team that you don't want to play. Because they're going to play great defense and they're going to hit a lot of threes. And that's always the most frustrating team to play, right? Just like the Golden State Warriors, right? Golden State Warriors, they play great defense, they hit a lot of threes, and that's how they beat you. Well, now there's another team that does that, and they have, in my opinion, better defenders. They don't have better shooters. You can't get better shooters than Steph and Clay. But they have better defenders in Kawhi and Paul George than Klay Thompson and Andrew Wiggins and Draymond Green are. This is without a doubt a contender. I think there's a case for them. I think they may be the best team in the West right now. I think they are probably a better team than the Warriors. Now, this is assuming Kawhi Leonard comes back and he's healthy. If Kawhi Leonard comes back and he's a shell of himself, scrap this whole segment. It doesn't count if he's completely hurt. But if he comes back and he's Kawhi Leonard, like Kevin Durant came back from his injury and he's still Kevin Durant, this is the best team in the West. This is the team that is going to win consistent games. And yeah, it's going to be one of those teams that Kawhi Leonard sits out a game, Paul George sits out a game, and they're still going to beat you. Like, yeah, it's nice when they sit out, but they're such a well-rounded, well-balanced team. The depth is just going to overwhelm so many teams because their bench is going to be better than any other bench in the NBA. And their starters are arguably a top 5 starting group in the NBA. They have a top 3, maybe top 5 duo in their two superstars, right? You look at the top superstars, LeBron, AD, I don't know, Curry, and I don't know who's the number 2 on the Warriors. It's not really Clay. I don't know. It's Curry and Poole or Draymond or Clay or Wiggins, whoever you want to say there. Giannis and Middleton, I think, is probably better. KD and Kyrie. I would take Kawhi and Paul George over KD and Kyrie because they play fantastic defense and they give you almost the same amount of offensive production. I say almost because KD and Kyrie are unbelievable scorers, but Kawhi and Paul George can get the ball in the basket. Paul George was a former top 3 MVP and top 3 Defensive Player of the Year player in OKC in 2017. This is not a team to be sleeping on. This is not a team to be forgetting about. This is not a team to look at without their top 2 players. Kawhi and Paul George miss a game. This is not an easy win. This is not, bet all your money, they're going to win this game. And I see Gil bringing up in the comments, yeah, they still have Brandon Boston, Luke Kennard, Amir Coffey. This is a deep team. All of those players are like deserving NBA roster players. And I didn't even mention them yet because that's how far back they are. They also have Terrence Mann. It's just a really good team. It's just a really good team. They're not going to be flashy. They're not going to overwhelm you. They're going to play defense, and they're going to win. It's going to remind you a lot, I think, of the San Antonio Spurs, who was the leader of that team, late, in the 2012 to 2015 era. It wasn't Tim Duncan. It wasn't Tony Parker. It wasn't Manu Ginobili. It was a young man by the name of Kawhi Leonard, who every year was in the top 3 MVP voting. He's also winning Defensive Player of the Year, it seemed like, every year. Because he just did his job, and nobody talks about him because he just doesn't force anybody to. He's not going out and tweeting wild things. He's not saying wild things in press conferences. He goes to work, does his job, goes home, and we don't hear from him. Right? Kawhi Leonard's been hurt forever. When was the last time you heard anything about Kawhi Leonard? It's probably when he got hurt. Right? Like that's him. He just doesn't cause drama. He doesn't cause controversy. And that's one of the best things about him is he just goes so under the radar. When I see people making top 10 lists in the NBA, I never see people put Kawhi anymore. Because they just completely forgot about him. And I don't blame them. There's some guys like Kevin Durant. When Kevin Durant was injured, we heard from KD. Right? Everyone was still putting KD in their top 10 lists. Because he's on the top of your mind. Kawhi Leonard's just chilling at home. He's probably watching some, he's watching Glee or something like that. And he's just kicking back. Maybe he's going on some nature hikes. I don't know what he does. But he's not forcing anyone to hear about him. He's just yeah, I'm going to be me. I'm going to show up to my job and I'm going to do it. And do it as good as anybody else in the NBA can. He may be the best two-way player in the NBA still. And and there's a guy named Giannis Antetokounmpo in the NBA. Don't sleep on Kawhi Leonard. Don't sleep on the Clippers. This is not a team that you want to play. All right, guys. I think this is probably going to be it. I'm kind of sad still that the TikTok live, it just ended after 25 minutes or so. And I tried to restart it and it just instantly ended again. So I don't really know what exactly happened, but I'll try and get that fixed for next time. It was a lot of fun talking NBA. I love talking basketball. First time doing an hour-long really recording without any questions or, I just went out here and I talked and I had a lot of fun doing it. So I'm excited to be talking NBA for America's Finest Sports. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to try and bring on guests, but if you guys ever have any questions, join the Discord, which is going to be in the description down below. Join the Discord and, talk basketball, talk baseball, talk football, talk whatever you want. Thank you, everybody, and I'll see all of you again next time.